Testing. There it is. Okay. Please find your seats as we begin at 1:15. This session will go from 1:15 until 2 o'clock, where we'll have a 15-minute break. Again, with the 15-minute break, there will be refreshments out there, coffee and treats and so on. If you want fancier coffee, you can go to the coffee shop there, and we have fancy coffees and other treats that you can get. We also have books in the back there. You're welcome to peruse, and those are for purchase. And so look through those, please. There's also going to be a time of question and answer at the end. And so Pastor Klemme is going to speak for about a half hour, and then there will be 15 minutes of questions. So if you have questions, would you like them to ask questions during, or would you want them to wait until the end?
Probably wait till the end.
Wait till the end, yeah. Write them down, wait till the end, and he will answer all of your questions. Pastor Klemme earned his Bachelor of Arts from Concordia University in Wisconsin, his Master of Divinity from the Free Lutheran Seminary. He has been a parish pastor in Illinois and currently is at Minnewaska Lutheran Church in Starbuck, Minnesota. He is also a Kierkegaard-reading, sushi-loving man. And would you please welcome Pastor Micah Klemme. I think you are still, right?
Afternoon. I agreed to take the afternoon slot, so you're all still worried about your food digesting, and you might not pay attention as much or whatever. So if you don't have any, you won't have any questions at the end. But it's an honor to get up here and talking about this subject. This subject has become more dear to me as within the last couple years. The reason I thought of this topic was because a friend of mine is a Lutheran school teacher, and he noticed that his kids weren't hanging out. They're not friends with each other. They go home and their friends are online. And then I realized that we're old and we're not in sync with what the younger generation is doing. And so that made me just think about technology in general. And as a newer-ish pastor, there's a lot of years of ministry ahead, and there's going to be a lot of changes. And it's kind of a terrifying thing to try and look into the future. So we'll do our best as we go forward. I do have an outline, and you can follow along. I'm not going to really reference the outline, so as you hear me saying these things, you can just track my thought. After a period of isolation in the mid-19th century, Japan opened its borders to trade with the industrial powers of the West. The country was introduced to the symbol of expansion, the train. Young boys were encouraged to study them using anything from toys to science magazines. And yet these trains were not realistic. They were not actually model trains. It was a product of imagination that led to further imagination. The youths that were noticeably obsessed with the locomotives were labeled train boys. Although planes and battleships were also objects of industrial obsession, Japan's demilitarization after the Second World War meant that only the train boys remained. Since Japan failed to conquer territory, their symbol of industry sought a new campaign, the conquest of time. And the dreamers came up with the electric bullet train, the Shinkansen, in their minds long before it became a reality. We ought not doubt the power of dreamers, but we also must recognize that their imagination was bolstered by technology and media. Japan was pressured to enter into the industrial world, and soon its people became absorbed in it, which in turn shaped views of themselves and the world around them. Christians live in a world of change, fueled by dreams and technology. Examining the history of mankind through the cycles of dreams and technology will expose idolatry, give greater appreciation for Christian doctrine, and through the hope of Christ, grant opportunity for the future of the church on earth. The first part in your outline, I define dreams. We got to be clear here. This is basically meaning an imagination that shapes your own reality. And so if you read The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, Carl Trueman takes his definition of the social imaginary from Charles Taylor, and he describes it this way: The social imaginary is the way people think about the world, how they imagine it to be, how they act intuitively in relation to it. Man was first created, then he started dreaming, and then he created technology through the ages to accomplish those dreams. But the dream came before the technology. Now next on to what is technology? And I'm using a definition from a Christian who is just writing an overview of this subject as well. But John Dyer defines technology as the human activity for using tools to transform God's creation for practical purposes. So I start with that, and I don't bother with another definition for that. But I move on, and most of what I'm presenting on comes from this book. This was an absolutely fun, astonishing read. It's called Technics and Civilization by Lewis Mumford, and he actually sets forth and tries to have a survey of history pretty much describing the relationship between technology and how it shaped civilization through time. So it's been a really helpful book. I'll reference it quite a bit. But he makes a distinction between tool and machine. And I'll bring up this definition later on too, so keep it in your back pocket. He says the tool lends itself to manipulation, the machine to automatic action. He acknowledges that these definitions can be dependent on the craftsman. For instance, the person skilled with a particular tool has a certain muscle memory that makes his movements sort of automatic by themselves. He's become machine-like because he's so good at his craft. He goes on to refer to all the combined technologies through the ages as the machine. That's how he defines the machine. It's the entire technological complex. And so when I refer to the machine, that's what I'm talking about, the entire technological complex. Now, there are positive and negative effects that come with every technology we have. There's always a goal, an original goal in mind when technology is made, yet for every positive effect of technology, a negative one is also created. So calculators can solve our problems for us, but then we forget how to do the written form. We can no longer solve problems by hand. Here's another example. The University of California, Irvine, they made a new tomato picker, and they had to have the tomatoes fit the machine. So they had to cultivate the tomatoes in such a way to fit inside the machine so it could operate properly. Just as tomatoes had to be grown to fit the tomato picker, so too are humans molded by the machine, being shaped in its image. A couple of problems that have arisen in the overall look at technology. There's two definitions to go through. And usually there's a sense of optimism or pessimism that accompany each of these. Instrumentalism is the idea that technology is neutral and does not condition our humanness. That's a definition from Clifford G. Christians. He's a media ethicist, and I'm taking that definition from him. When people say that technology is not the problem, they miss out on how dreams are invested in these tools. Our technology has values built into them. And then another author goes into this too. He says, when we just say guns don't kill people, people kill people, we're significantly overlooking the fact that values are placed into technology. So I guess if you are upset at that line, maybe how about this line? TikTok doesn't shorten our attention spans. People shorten our attention spans. It's like, no, I think TikTok's doing something awful to us, right? Most people never think about how technology shapes the environment around them. Instrumentalism gives humanity too much credit and neglects the environment-changing effects of technology on humanity. All right, the next one is technological determinism. This one I don't think we run into as much. This is the idea that humanity is helpless before the unstoppable progress of the machine. People in this worldview give technology too much credit. They assume that human mastery over the machine is a futile attempt, and actually some people don't even view this entirely in a negative light. Karl Marx believed that the inevitable machine takeover would lead to the equality among classes, erasing the need for work. But both instrumentalism and technological determinism are problems for a Christian worldview. One fails to take sinful human nature's effect on technology. The other fails to see human dignity and God's sovereignty over his creation. And in Lewis Mumford's book, he talks about basically a history of technology, and I have organized some of the parts that stuck out to me, stuff that we take for granted today. Humanity has been given the right to have dominion over the earth, but in the fall has overstepped its boundaries. Throughout history, the desire of dominion has taken many forms. First, the mechanical clock. Mumford emphasizes that our modern-day world has been shaped by the invention of the mechanical clock. After the fall of the Roman Empire, monasteries kept a semblance of order by a disciplined life of prayer and work. They kept strict hours of the day, but nature prevented them from having a precise ordering of hours. Sundials were dependent on the sun, and water clocks could not work in the winter. The mechanical clock overcame nature's keeping of time as men now dreamed in, and I quote, an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences. Humanity may have conquered nature's limits on keeping time, but in turn, people ordered their day according to the clock rather than nature or the body. Next, the mines. And this is an example of the desire for power and wealth. The desire for dominion of the earth has led to mining operations. The precious metals that form advanced tools must be sought deep underground. Innovations in technology favored mining because of the promise of power and wealth these materials gave. If humanity actually wanted to thrive, technological advancements should have favored the farm, because the farm is where all the life grows out of, not underground. But instead, according to Mumford, technology prospered lustily, precisely in those parts of the environment where the body was most infamously treated by custom, namely in the mines, the monastery, and the battlefield. Technology favors the sword over the plowshare. Perfection. Not only has humanity sought dominion over nature and other men, it sought to bring glory to itself, just as in the hearts of those at Babel. The invention of the modern-day mirror literally changed how people examined themselves. In the days of the Roman Empire, the mirrors were dim, and the image it reflected was dark and more distorted than reality. St. Paul references looking into a dim mirror, but then one day Christians will see clearly. But when the modern-day mirror was invented, people saw their exact physical image reflected, inflating their egos, making them be more concerned how they look than in previous times. They dreamed of a perfect vision of themselves, but as a consequence, they were now more aware of the blemishes that they had and the effects of old age on the body. Technology gave the mirror a more accurate portrayal of the body, and with it, the dream of conquering or glorifying the image they beheld. Musical instruments also became more accurate and precise with the passing of time as the machine grew. Mechanical innovations gave rise to new ranges of sounds, extending what was previously impossible. Eventually, the whole orchestra was assembled, and all of the musical knowledge of the past was united in one group. And, I quote, were utilized freely to create a new, ideal world where the tragic destiny, the dim longings, the heroic destinies of men could be entertained once more. There was a dream of a perfect society that they saw in their perfected music. Over time, people began treating the technological complex, the machine, as a religion. The deists believed that God created the world, but now mankind is responsible for perfecting it with the aid of the machine. Societies used to be more superstitious, relying on belief in magic to manipulate the world and overcome the limitations of the body. But seeing the many innovations in technology, belief in magic gave way to the dreams of a technological paradise. Any religion must have its core teachings and beliefs and goals. Worship of the machine god was no different, and it included a teaching and goal of efficiency by any means possible. Cheaper, better, and faster were the goals of the machine mindset. And this gave rise to large-scale industry and more efficient tools. Yet what was efficient for the factory could be inefficient for the human being. The amount of goods produced often exceeded the need of the household, the excess of production being a sort of grain offering to the machine god. Humanity took a physical toll in service of the machine. Humanity sacrificed their own physical environments for the sake of industry. Pollution poisoned the air. Working conditions were monotonous. Children were forced to work in the dark environments of the coal mines. Men were underpaid for painstaking work and resorted to drugs and alcohol to cope with their environments. Mumford recognizes the poor replacement for relief and rest, quoting that opiates have become the religion of the poor. Through this brutish toll on the body, humanity was looking more and more like the machine itself. So there's a response, right? People realize this and they strike back against the empire. Resistance to the machine came in many forms, in many figures. Romanticism was one such movement that emerged in part as a reaction to the machine. It was a movement in the arts and literature which originated in the 18th century, emphasizing inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual. The machine downgraded the body and took away the creative capacities of men, but it caused a reaction. Mumford said, what did it cause? Its indirect action was to make men hyper-emotional and irrational, and thus rise the Romantics. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says that the chief idea of the movement was that the character of art and beauty and our engagement with them should shape all aspects of human life. Carl R. Trueman, and so that's The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, this book, he devotes a whole chapter to the Romanticists. He tracks the modern mindset of identity through the ideas of the Romanticists. He notes that poets such as Percy Shelley thought of themselves as priests connecting the people back to nature. Shelley's argument, and I quote from him, Shelley's argument for poetry is, in a sense, utilitarian, in that its purpose is not simply for the moment of pleasing or pleasure in reading, the pleasure that reading might induce. Pleasure is not an end of itself. The purpose of poetry and the pleasure it involves is nothing less than the moral improvement of the audience. So their goal was to improve morality. And the Romantics stressed that morality is from sentimentality. They asked not how one thinks about life, but what one feels about life. And as the final form, I guess, of this teaching came what has been labeled as expressive individualism. Trueman defines expressive individualism as follows. It is the personal authenticity found through public performances of inward desires. And the most powerful inward desires of most people are sexual in nature. So identity has come to be thought of as strongly sexual in nature. So that's, we jumped a few hundred years, but here we are. Samuel D. James explains in his book, Digital Liturgies, this exact same expressive individualism. He says it's the notion of being true to oneself, constantly actualizing one's inner desires, perspectives, and feelings. It is the epitome of the good life. It is the form of the internet. The teachings of the Romantics have thrived and evolved and are here with us today. What helped us have these ideas get into our bloodstreams? Media and technology. All right, so now we're moving on to media. Human society is shaped by language. The scope of communication is limited by how advanced the technology is in a society. Trueman states, the poet forms the message, the technology available to them is the medium. The rise of our modern concept of the self was heightened by the mirror, but even more through media technology, through which came teachings of the Romantics and others. So media ecology is the way I'm going to describe our environment of communication. Neil Postman, and there's a classic book, maybe some of you have read it, and it has some staying power. It's Amusing Ourselves to Death, and it pictures people with TVs as heads. Like that's their life now. They're walking TVs. But Neil Postman he compares humanity to a specimen in a petri dish. Humanity finds itself changing according to the substance it's growing in. Media ecology is the environment of communication. It shapes our politics, social organizations, and habitual ways of thinking. The past several centuries have seen a dramatic shift in how society's media ecology has changed. And Clifford G. Christian states it well, social change results from media transformation. So I'm listing off some of these major communication shaping technologies. We got the telegraph, and when the telegraph came out, although news could travel quickly, it came out in little snippets. So we lost longer descriptions of news events, and we shortened them down, right? So speed increased, but word choice was determined by the goal of efficiency, right? Photography. With the advent of the photograph, society began to shift from a word-based culture to an image-based culture. A picture is not worth 1,000 words, at least not any words that can go beyond description. Communicating in images is limited because there are no propositions to be found in images. I quote Neil Postman, "It offers no assertions to refute, so it is not refutable." So you have a wonderful picture. You can't disagree with me that I had a good time. You know, it's a good picture. Television. This was also another shift in our media ecology. One of them notable to the Christian is how public speaking has changed. And Neil Postman devotes an entire chapter on televangelism and how the speaker on television, the preacher on television, was pressured to be entertaining. And he was conditioned by the audience to not be offensive for the sake of ratings. And he gives an example of a specific televangelist who watered down his teaching on what we believe just because people of other religions might be tuning in. You know, he didn't want to offend his audience. In this case, the audience has shaped the preacher. The itching ears have multiplied and are hidden from our eyes. These past inventions, they all led up to what we now have, and that's the internet. We're in the internet age. And all these past inventions, there was a sense of progress, and who cares about the past anymore, right? Out with the old, in with the new. And the same goes with the internet. There's the ever-changing moments of the present. The past is outdated. History no longer matters because it's irrelevant. And the internet has shaped us in this way. And Samuel James describes that it's shaping us to be curious about things we don't really care about, opening us to be vulnerable to distractions and temptations we would have never come near away from the screen. In the ever-novel world of the internet, it has become more and more difficult to pursue relevance. People can do whatever they want and join whatever subculture they want. And they can reinforce their own interests through whatever the algorithm has joined them to. Subcultures rise and fall because of algorithms that feed into their own group ideas, creating, this is what John Dyer is quoting, creating an echo chamber phenomenon. So what do you get when you blend the machine and the romantics? You have one is idolatry of the machine itself, one is idolatry of the self as a reaction. You combine them and you get consumerism, which is what we have today. And I quote from Truman again, "Consumerism or late capitalism fuels this notion with its message of the customer as king and of the goods we consume as being basic to who we are." Commercials contain the goals of the romantics. They're dramas. They're not even telling you facts about, we don't know what's in spam, but it's great, right? They want you to feel good about the product, but they tell you nothing about the product itself. The Romantic era popularized the story, and the machine capitalized on it. The news is geared towards customers. The media often focuses on smaller topics in the middle of a larger event because it moves people emotionally. Instead of reporting the big picture, they focus on stories. Clifford G. Christian says that these stories are anchored in electronic images that move people psychologically in private worlds that may be detached from society and face-to-face politics. Truman points out that consumerism determines cultural relevancy, saying we can believe whatever we want, or we can believe whatever we can believe that we can be whoever we want to be, but the market always places limits on that reality. So here we are, modern dreams. What happened to the train boys after the bullet train was invented? For most, trains became an object of nostalgia, right? So they're still obsessed with trains, but it's all nostalgia at this point. And it comes with an accompanying sense of sadness. The glory days of the development of trains were over. Many train boys turned to other obsessions, including escape into comic books and Japanese animation, known today as anime. These subgroups were labeled as people obsessed with things that are not real, or otaku. One former train boy laments what his culture has become. Whereas train otaku of the past interacted with real trains to invoke the unreal, today's otaku are now purely interact with the unreal. Fantasy has triumphed over reality. Others too have seen a slowing down of progress and the setting in of societal decay. Somewhere along the line, the machine changed its goals. Instead of a pursuit of progress, it has become an engine for the pursuit of desire. What has prevented this conquest of nature? What has caused this change? Well, mankind itself. And I quote from Mumford again. What is the use of equipping mankind with mighty powers to move and build and communicate if the final result is to enthrone the morbid impulses of a thwarted humanity? And so we realize the world's terrible, and so we delve into our fantasy worlds. Not only did the machine make life miserable, the machine also provided the means to make life tolerable under its own weight. As the cycle continues, total reliability on technology for all things has led to a sort of restlessness. And Mumford continues, he says, too dull to think, people might read. Too tired to read, they might look at moving pictures, because he wrote this in 1933. It was called Moving Pictures back then. They might look at moving pictures. In any case, they might avoid the call to action. A lack of progress in life is a lack of purpose in life. Like the train boys of Japan, their dreams of progress and the real world halted. So many escaped instead into fantasy worlds. The common restlessness found today is from a lack of purpose. And I quote from another guy who wrote digital liturgies. Yeah, it's fascinating, right? We're shaped, right? We talked about being shaped this morning. We are being shaped by the internet, and that's what he talks about. So I quote from him, from James. Some point to millennials and Gen Z having a worse economic situation than their parents as one source of their despair, right? So they see that progress is halting. And then they have this sort of wandering nature now. The church used to talk about a sin called Acadia, which is a word that means indifference, apathy, and melancholy. So James continues to describe this sin that used to be talked about a lot more. He describes the escape of pornography as a sin that arises out of Acadia. And he uses King David as an example where he had a duty, he had a purpose to go off to war, and yet there he is on his roof wandering on the palace. Those living without purpose are bound to wander. And so how much time do I got left? I got 2 minutes? All right, well, we don't need to talk about artificial intelligence. It's not here yet, the true stuff. AGI. So I'll make a comment on that. So AGI is what people are worried about, and that's artificial general intelligence. That is basically making a program that is completely indistinguishable from a human being, can do anything we can do and better. That's not here yet. It's a dream. All right, moving on. Transhumanism and posthumanism. So Lord willing, I'll do ministry for 40 years, but if the goals of transhumanism are true, Lord willing, I'll be here another 150 years. You know, like they want to improve, extend the human life. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You can read more about that in Dyer. I'm going to go to the conclusions I have here. And that's demythologizing the machine and regaining a sense of our own identity. When people fail to understand technology, they place it into a realm of myth. Dyer references the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, explaining this. You are used to technology you are born with. Everything that comes out before you turn 30 is new and interesting. And everything invented after you turn 30 is against the order of things and the beginning of the end of civilization as we know it. So we're quick to critique the latest technology, but we fail to articulate how current technology has already been shaping us. Christians should not be mystified by the latest ideas, which can lead either to worrying too much about technology or not worrying about it enough. So what do? It's always a good thing to go back to Scripture, reinforcing an understanding of the body, right? So people are worried about themselves, their egos, their own body, right? They're looking in the mirror, they're seeing all their blemishes, but now we have phones, we can look even deeper. We can manipulate our image on the screens. In the age of both inflated egos and despair, the body takes a toll. Recovering a sense of how God values humanity is brought out with a proper understanding of the body and how humanity will be physically restored in the resurrection. Reality will be changed in the blink of an eye, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed, from 1 Corinthians. As John Klemme, his title of his book reminds us, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are not just material, as the world suggests. We are not just fodder for the machine. We have a glorious end because we have a glorious beginning recovered by Christ incarnate. All right, I have like a minute?
Go ahead.
A minute, all right. Just don't ask any questions. I'll have plenty of time. No, okay. Klemme quotes, "It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness," in his book. If the darkness includes the false dreams of the world which are perpetuated by the idolatry of technology, then we must respond with a faithful and true vision of Christian hope. The truth became flesh and dwelt among us and died with all our sin, rising again to new life and offering that life to any who would receive him. Where do we continually receive him? And that's Christian Sutton also writing a summary of this discussion. He summarizes Christian worship as an embodied activity. Worship of God is worshiping God. Worship is God interacting with us in physical time and space. God's word touches our eardrums through sound waves. Forgiveness enters our bodies when we eat and drink the body and blood of Christ. And peace, the peace God gives through his gifts in worship, guard not only our souls, but also our hearts and minds into eternal life. And recovering Christian rhythm and wisdom, this is basically what Dr. Bierman was talking about, where we recover this habit. And there's a quote on habit. James says, "Habits like these create habits for our hearts." In a dislocated world, we can find a home among God's fellow people who share a common hope with us. And wisdom, I was going to talk about wisdom, but I'll leave Nick to talk about it next hour, right? Nick's going to talk about the Psalms. But for one thing, we're so busy in our schedules, so we don't know what it's like to slow down and really think about things anymore. And we need to slow down and actually meditate on the Word of God. But there are redemptive uses for technology. So I kind of gave the nightmare version of it, but that way we can appreciate the Bible more and what Christ has given us. But there are proper goals, also what was mentioned this morning, to serve our neighbor. Swords do turn into plowshares, so we can redeem what has been made. And I'll bring you back to I told you to put something in your back pocket. Do you remember the definition of tool? Right? It manipulates your environment. Machine is automatic action. Pastors should be craftsmen, not people who push a button on a machine, right? So, or just people in the church in general. If you're teaching someone, you don't want somebody else to automatically teach them. You want to be involved. You want to learn the craft. You want to become a skilled craftsman. You don't want to lend yourself away to the machine, whatever that may look like, right? So that's important, I think. Also, maybe just an interesting way to view our ministry, how often, how we are into the machine so much, or we rely on technology so much, is if the power goes out, how do you run worship, right? If it's our duty, how are you going to run a worship service without any power? You should know how to do that too, right? That shouldn't be an excuse either for not worshiping. I end with, distinguishing between good and bad forms of escape. I should make a comment on this. So not all escape is bad. And Gene Veith wrote a book called Reading Between the Lines and talking about Christian literature, how you can appreciate literature, good stories, and of course that goes into movies and games and all that realm. But Gene Veith makes a distinction between good and bad forms of escape. Good escape makes you appreciate reality more. Bad escape makes you despise it. We all need rest. We are not meant to live the machine life. We are meant to enjoy and create and play. It is part of who we were created to be. And so there are good stories to promote, and there are bad stories to avoid. And tribulation. All right, so I thought back to when I was teaching on Revelation last year, and reading Brighton's commentary was a delightful exercise. And he talks about the four horsemen. Brighton comments that the four horsemen of the apocalypse represent the twisted desires of conquest resulting in terrible consequences. The twisted dream of dominion leads to bloodshed, then sickness, and then death, right? Four horsemen. Those in power always want more, and this is the reality of human history. Christians must endure these hardships resulting from the twisted dreams of men until the Lord's return. And Soren Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. So take that into account in the world of dreams and technology. Every dream must be taken captive and put under the feet of Christ. All the goals of the secular writers I looked into had dreams of a solution to the problems that they saw. Many had a goal of gaining mastery over the machine or recovering a sense of human dignity. And we believe these are impossible tasks because we cannot master human nature, who is ultimately behind the machine. And without God, we would only consume ourselves in this world. Only in Christ can the dream of paradise be accomplished. The Tower of Babel does make you wonder, though, how far can we advance in technology before Christ returns? So that's the mystery. How far are we going to get before it all is over? What will be only the Christian, armed and comforted with Christ himself, can forge our way ahead into the unknown. But the end is known, and we set our eyes on the goal. Any questions? 5 minutes overtime. Sorry.
All right, Micah. In your research, did you find any of those authors addressing identity? So you have the tool guy who's got a skill, and then a machine takes over the need for his skill. He loses his identity in that, and so pretty soon the obsession or the envy becomes the machine. And we see that cycle in society. Do you have any resources that you went that really dealt with identity and the loss of identity and value? That's
this guy. So I'm drawing like the history of technology. This guy is writing about that. Carl Trueman is writing about, the rise and triumph of the modern self, how we view ourselves today, how we got here. But he starts at Romanticism pretty much. And that's why I view this as kind of the prequel. This is the prequel. This is The Empire Strikes Back. And then I got this. This was the media ethics book. Talked more about the specifics of media. And then I drew from other things. But if you want to talk about identity stuff, this guy talks about that. Yeah.
Condensation of that book is Strange New World.
Strange New World? Of this one? This, okay, yep. Okay, yeah, good. It's this one is it's
and
tough
it's
to get
in the back.
Oh, yeah,
but
is in
wait,
the back.
there's more.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, over here.
Do you have any comments as we think of the congregation? And the church has been involved in media for a long time, music, the arts, stained glass windows, and now today it seems like there's a shift away from what's real and reality. And so any comments on truth, goodness, and beauty and how we express that in a congregational setting?
Boy, it's a lot to chew on. In my reasoning for pursuing wisdom, I'm going to take some time and think about that, meditate on it. From what do we need? There's a yearning for interactions. This book, Digital Liturgies, talks about, and this came out last year, so it's pretty up to date on the internet, but right now the trend is reaction videos on YouTube. So people are craving authentic interaction with people, and people are getting paid to hear someone else, their opinion on the latest movie. Wouldn't you want to get paid to do that? But they're craving interaction. So what do we do as a church? Just interact. I don't know. Hang out with them more. Be that. We don't need to have YouTube reaction videos. We need to actually be that authentic presence in their lives somehow. Somehow need to befriend all these gamer kids. You maybe play games with them, but then hang out in real life too. Do both, maybe.
Yes, over here.
Micah, you talked about like bad escape and good escape. I think we can think of ways that there's good escape, like on an individual level. Is there, like on a congregational level, is there good forms of escape?
Like stuff to do with the congregation? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so let's have a Lord of the Rings watch party. I don't know, like good people. What else is better than that? Yeah, I'm fine. Like I stress, I would rather have a really good quality movie that teaches really good lessons than watch something on PureFlix because it's bad quality and the teaching isn't that great either. So you might as well watch a good secular film and talk about it and have a good time with your people than have bad quality theology and bad quality movie. So, you can escape, but, it has to be appropriate, and you have to be really careful about what you watch, what you approve of. Yeah, but I love that idea, but at the same time, it goes into you're automating teaching by, you could be doing something else instead of watching a movie with people in church too, but it's not a bad thing either. But yeah, I think there's a place for it. It all depends on your context.
Micah, I'm interested in where we've ended up with technology now. Where is the unique opportunities for the gospel today? And I'm not talking about like, oh, well, you could make TikTok videos, but how has the way technology has shaped us, where has it opened doors for witnessing or the gospel that maybe weren't before?
Good question. I'm still figuring that out, and if you guys know, we can definitely, if someone maybe wants to answer that, maybe we can do some crowdsourcing, so if maybe an answer from because this is just, it's better to hear everybody, or if someone has a question and an answer to that.
Is that an answer over here?
Yeah.
I see that hand.
No. But, so one resource I would suggest, like an answer, partial answer to your question, there's a online annual conference held each October called the Gospel Outreach with Media Conference. Mm-hmm. And it's a conference that's held totally online where some articles are posted or presentations, and then there's online discussion. But there's a different theme each year discussing some aspect of using technology in the spread of the gospel. This past year, a lot of the presentations were about the Chosen TV series and how that could be used for outreach. And mine was analyzing the theology of it. So,
I will say that as you go forward, as people are being more dislocated, that's another term that's used here. They're in their bodies still, because we often say disembodied, but another guy makes the comment that we're still in our bodies, but they're dislocated. It's like they're feeling the restlessness that prisoners feel. The part of the prisoner punishment is to be just away from family and friends, and today technology and media has pressured people to just be away from people, and that has not helped our sense of restlessness. So whenever we move forward, I think those opportunities have to be in person, forming communities, getting those patterns back, like Dr. Bierman was talking about, creating those group habits together, and that can be for fun too. Like he's talking about Christian formation, we can have other habit formation that can bring us opportunities to preach the gospel too, precursors to sharing the gospel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pastor Klemme. Let's all give Pastor Klemme a hand. Thank you. We have a 15-minute break now. Come back at 2:15, and Pastor Nick Schultz will be presenting. Thank you.